Welcome. Hi everybody, I'm here with my son Hans, and we are here to talk to you about The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, which is a play that the two of us adapted together back in 2018, and we just got it published through Stage Partners. And so we want to just take a little bit of time to talk to you about what we thought were the highlights and what makes this adaptation unique. So, so I guess one of the first things to talk about is how do you make a short story that is probably America's first real ghost story, has 3 characters really. How do you make that a full-length play, and how do you make it interesting?
Right. Well, I mean, it is the legend of Sleepy Hollow, and so Sleepy Hollow being that town, and so we really, for our ensemble, wanted to make just a lot of different towns members. Washington Irving, in the adaptation, sort of name drops just a couple little groups, doesn't really delve into them, and so as sort of our job, we dove into those characters a little bit more. Those characters being sort of the Sleepy Hollow boys. They mentioned sort of Brom's gang.
We should say that the 3 main characters, are Brom Bones, Katrina Van Tassel, and Ichabod Crane is the main guy.
Yep.
And so we gave the Brom a gang called the Sleepy Hollow Boys. They're touched on.
It's touched on very briefly. The Van Tassels are mentioned as these big landowners and who are throwing this party. He does mention a preacher. Just very basic sort of roles you would have just in a town.
And we made a sidekick, Dirk Vanderflat, and that's the role that
I got to play Dirk.
Hans played.
Right.
There isn't a sidekick in the book, but
no.
When you're doing things for on stage, you make things a little bit different, and so we gave Brom a sidekick.
We gave Brom a sidekick, and that was actually inspired by a really bad made-for-TV movie version of Sleepy Hollow.
That's right. It's funny what you get inspired by. Sometimes you get inspired by, bad things.
Yeah, well, we had a lot of fun in that sort of research process where we're like, what are things that we sort of like from how other people have spun the story?
And so we were kind of trying to figure out how do we want to write this show, and I've done, like I said, you've seen maybe the video on the Seussification of Romeo and Juliet. I've written some rhyming plays in the past, and so I was kind of vacillating back and forth whether or not this play should rhyme, and really it was Hans who said, we should make this one rhyme because maybe that could kind of give it sort of a neat literary quality still on stage, So on stage, we kind of wanted it to feel a little bit still classical. We wanted it to still feel lyrical. And we were world building. We were kind of trying to create a different world on stage for this particular play. And so the rhyme was a big part of that. I guess we could talk about the world.
Yeah, well, so when sort of developing this world that we were creating, the word we threw around a lot was magic, magical. Like, how do we have magic in the air without it being just so outright and forward? So we wanted it to still, seem realistic to an extent, but just have sort of this weird mystic quality to it. And I think the lyricism lends itself well to that. I think a big part was having the townspeople narrate to the audience directly.
Yeah.
And so there's moments where they will swing out of character and address the audience.
Yeah, it's a real presentational kind of moment when you've got a character who's talking to another character, and then all of a sudden one character stops out and just starts narrating right to the audience.
Ichabod Crane doesn't know where he's messing.
Yeah! We need to teach that teacher a lesson.
Brom and the boys went to work right away, trying their best to wreck Ichabod's day. But he was unthwarted and passed through the town, his head and heart flying. He could not come down.
I like plays that do that. Hans likes plays that do that. And I think it's fun. Like if you got Brom Bones and he's talking as Brom Bones, and then he walks to the audience and said, "Brom often thinks this," so it's suddenly he's taking on a completely different voice, and it adds to sort of this magical. Oh, what am I watching here? This is definitely an interesting lyrical world.
And related to that, another thing we sort of chose with this production, it's not necessarily written into the script, but we did have our characters playing multiple people as congregation members, or later in the next scene, school children, and sort of vice versa.
One of my favorite things about the magic of the world, in the script we talk a lot about magic. We kind of leave it up to directors to how they want to do it, but in our particular play, we had what I call whooshing happening. And so we would have actors who would just say the word whoosh. They're talking about the hollow and it's scary, and they go whoosh.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's normally accompanied with a turn or like someone backing up.
Right. Yeah.
And others draw similar notion-filled parallels. Certain, the play still continues this way, under some power that holds gentle sway over the people, their minds, and their memory, so that they walk in continual reverie.
Let's do it again.
Okay.
So we would have actors do that. And it really does work, because on stage you don't get what you can do on film. On film you can have an actual whoosh sound, or you can have, a close-up on somebody. There are no close-ups in theater, and there aren't, we thought it would be about, we'll just have the actors do the whoosh sound, and it really did sort of create this neat, ethereal, airy, breathy, magic-y, cursed quality.
Well, right, and there's maybe even something a little, campy to it, where it's like, when you're like a kid, you're like pew pew with your guns or whatever, and so we're just making our own sound effects,
Yeah, no, it is fun. We like fun junk.
Another thing that added to a lot of that, I mean, we did touch on this with the whooshing, is just movement. Like, movement in general was very stylized, and since you sort of directed that, if you could elaborate a little bit more.
So it's a very physical, and so we wanted to have like some acrobatics. So in the introduction to Sleepy Hollow, we learn all about it. We actually practiced a spin move where we'd have girls who were like spun on the floor, and leaves would fly around.
This drowsy glen tucked away from acclaim for years has been called Sleepy Hollow by name.
The Hollow Boys would enter, and they would roll off each other's backs and sort of flip, and Old Lady Nightmare gets thrown up into the air and is held up, away above everybody's heads, and then she's like kind of casting this mystical magic on the people around, and so we wanted that kind of stuff to happen. We wanted special effects. We made use of a scrim, which is that interesting backdrop where if you light the back of it, you can see through it, but if you light the front of it, it's solid. And so we wanted to do some interesting shadow puppet sort of stuff, or silhouettes. So we were trying to make use of that kind of thing.
He gallops the woods in moonlit routine, in quest of the head that he lost at the scene.
Like a midnight blast, he thunders in haste, for to be back to the churchyard by daybreak.
When we talk about the Hessian, who later becomes the headless horseman, they talk about how his head might have gotten blown off by some cannonball. Well, we actually wanted to actually see that, and so we had a head rig that we devised, where one of the actors' his head just drops off into his hands. And we'll have a whole nother video just on the head rig. Look for it, and you'll learn how we actually had an actor drop his head off of his shoulders.
Right, and so because it's more of a puppet-like movement style and acting, puppets themselves just sort of fit well into that world. Everything just sort of felt cohesive at that point.
There is a dog in the show that is a puppet, and there is the horse that Ichabod Crane rides, which
who I got to be the head of.
And there was another guy who got to be the butt of.
Yep.
And so we did that, and the Headless Horseman himself was a puppet. And we'll have a whole nother video too about the puppets in Sleepy Hollow, so stay tuned for that.
So one last thing we did want to sort of address while we're just sort of sitting down and talking was we added a character who is mentioned, but is not a character, and that would be Cotton Mather. In the book itself, Ichabod has a book by Cotton Mather, which we found out the title of it is like A History of New England Witchcraft, and that book
that's what it's called in the Legend of Sleepy Hollow, but I don't.
That book doesn't exist.
There's not a real book.
But we made Cotton Mather sort of this weird ghost, or voice inside Ichabod's head that just sort of haunts him and even taunts him.
This will not do. You must shun these dark arts. This will not do for a Puritan heart.
No, I'm loyal. You know that I'm steadfast. I study your sermons each day before breakfast.
That book contradicts all my written positions. But what do I know? I'm just in his head, even though I've been 100 years dead.
Him,
Yeah, I gotta say, and that was something too where Hans was really instrumental in really pushing this way too, because I thought that would be a fun idea, but man, did I end up loving the whole idea of Cotton Mather, because it really is a great way for Ichabod Crane to give the audience more information about himself, how superstitious he is, how scared he is of all kinds of things, and how he's such an adherent to this dead preacher who's just a voice in his mind.
And those are all things mentioned in the book, and so I think Cotton Mather ends up being a really cool vehicle to just display that.
Yeah.
And then what else?
Rip Van Winkle makes an appearance.
Yes.
Well, no.
Well, his wife
does. Yeah.
The two stories are very often packaged together. I know when I read this book back in high school, both of them were in the same unit together, and so as sort of a nod to Washington Irving, we had a little cameo, little hidden.
In case you didn't know that,
thing.
Washington Irving wrote Rip Van Winkle too. So we put him in there. And that was an idea of Eric Oren's, actually. Hi, Eric Oren. A friend of mine who's an artist actually handed me a copy of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, just like Hans said, and it also had Rip Van Winkle in it too. And so when I was reading that, he said, you know what? You really should have Rip Van Winkle as a character. And though we don't have Rip Van Winkle in there, we do have Dame Van Winkle, who makes an appearance at the Van Tassel's party.
My husband, Rip, the lazy do-nothing, left the house with his dog Wolf to go hunting. Do some work, Rip. I gave him a bawling. And that's the last time I ever saw him.
Are there any highlights, like things that you just liked from the BLC production?
I am a huge fan of the puppetry. It was sort of my first time really diving into playing with puppets and that sort of thing. But I took a real liking to that. And I think, when you're sort of in that mindset where you're already sort of moving stylized anyway, it really just sort of helps you when you pick up these puppets, to sort of project your acting into this machine you're holding, basically. Yeah. So.
And I will say, too, there is a time where we break, well, maybe it's a couple times, we break from the rhyme. And it was really interesting because it gives, the Sleepy Hollow Boy is delivering a sort of a female, more sensitive perspective on what a girl might feel like from somebody who's trying to woo her. And it was really great for us because we had a girl playing the boy, saying the line and stopping doing it in rhyme.
He's at her house eating dinner!
What's next?
I can't believe it! What's his appeal?
Well, it's probably because he appeals to her sense of value and self-worth. He sees in her a whole person and more than just a pretty face. Her sense of wonder and aspirations are satiated by Ichabod Crane's perpetual attentiveness and observant demeanor, evoking an affirmative reaction in Katrina, whose needs in this regard have been long unfulfilled. I don't know. That's just my take.
Check for the BLC version of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, and we'll put it link to that right here.
And then, otherwise, I would say just check out our show.
If you are a director and you like the whole idea of doing The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, check out our production. We would love other people to do this. And so take a look and see if it's not something that you guys want to do for your production.
I think that's all I have.
Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe.